Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
And may the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
We're here to take complex source material and really distill the actionable wisdom for you, the learner.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into what I think is one of the most structurally brilliant chapters of the Qur'an.
Surah Al-Hashr, the 59th chapter, which translates to the gathering. And it really is a foundational text. It's like a divine commentary on an entire historical event.
It truly is. I mean, it was revealed around 625 CE, so the immediate context is the expulsion of the Jewish tribe, the Banu Nadir, from Madinah.
Right.
But if you just read it as a historical footnote, you miss everything. You miss the whole point. This surah is structured to be a complete blueprint.
And that's our mission today. We want to treat this surah as a masterclass. We're going to analyze how it just seamlessly weaves together military strategy, revolutionary economic policy, social health.
And the bedrock of it all, spiritual monotheism, all in one cohesive unit.
We're not just summarizing here. We're really trying to extract the technical nuance from the giants of classical Sunni exegesis, Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi, Al-Tabari, Al-Sadi.
And the rigorous Hadith scholarship that goes with them.
Yes.
And look, if you take just one thing away from our discussion today, let it be this. Surah Al-Hashr establishes what you could call the law of victory.
The law of victory. I like that.
It's a divine mechanism.
Yeah.
And it proves that ultimate success is never, ever primarily a function of material strength or superior weapons or, impenetrable forts.
No.
It is fundamentally, absolutely, and irrevocably a consequence of spiritual alignment with the divine will. The external outcome, it's just a mirror of the internal state.
Okay, let's unpack that right from the beginning, because the opening verse isn't just a beautiful intro, it's the whole theological premise for everything that follows.
It is.
The surah begins, whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth glorifies Allah, and He is the exalted in might, the wise.
And right there, that's the universal liturgy, the tasbih.
Yeah.
But what's really remarkable is the verb choice. The verse uses the past tense, sabaha. It means glorified.
Glorified, not glorifies or will glorify.
Exactly. And commentators like Al-Qurtubi and Al-Sadi spend a lot of time on this. It's not saying creation should glorify God or that it will. It's a declarative statement. This glorification is a timeless, established, operational reality right now.
So this isn't some metaphor like, oh, the stars' intricate movements imply God's power. You're saying it suggests an active, existing state of conscious praise.
Precisely. Now, there is a scholarly debate here that's worth noting.
Okay.
Some classical scholars said, well, this tasbih is just the natural state of submission. The laws of physics, biology. That's their way of praising God.
Which makes sense.
It does. But others, and notably Al-Sadi, argued very strongly that the use of sabaha here implies a literal, conscious articulation of praise, a praise known to the Creator, even if we don't understand the language of every single molecule or organism.
Right. That distinction, it changes everything. If every atom, every star, every single organism is already engaged in conscious praise from the moment it exists,
then the entire universe is defined by total operational submission.
right.
And this is the essential theological foundation. It sets the stage for the political events to come. We're being shown the cosmic reality, first universal submission. So now, what happens when a community, like the Banu Nadir, chooses active rebellion? When they choose treachery and plot an assassination against the messenger of God in that system.
They become a theological anomaly, a glitch in the matrix, so to speak.
Exactly. Their expulsion isn't just a tactical victory for the Muslims. It's the inevitable friction caused by a deliberate human choice to oppose a universe that is fundamentally defined by submission.
So destruction or expulsion isn't just a punishment, it's more like a self-correction mechanism, the universe correcting itself against entities that violate its very nature.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Their rebellion, by definition, means they cannot remain within a system that's built on universal alignment.
And that just demolishes the idea that power is just about material things. When you look at history, you see these powerful communities fall, even with huge military budgets and high walls. This surah is arguing they fell because they chose to fight against the alignment of the cosmos itself.
And that profound recalibration of power leads us right to the pairing of the divine names at the end of the verse. Al-Aziz, the mighty, and Al-Hakim, the wise. This pairing is our first core life lesson here.
I really want to spend some time on this duality because it feels like a blueprint for effective governance, both spiritual and, temporal. Al-Aziz is power, might, unconquerable strength.
And Al-Hakim is wisdom, precision, putting things exactly where they belong. We can see the failure of this balance in the Banu Nadir. They had Izzah, they had economic might, powerful forts, respected status.
They had power.
They had power, but they completely lacked hikmah, wisdom, their treachery, that plot with the millstone. It was the epitome of short-sighted, morally bankrupt power. Power without wisdom leads to self-destructive tyranny.
And what about the opposite? Wisdom without power.
It's ineffectual, it can be ignored, just dismissed. But Allah possesses both. He demonstrated his Izzah, his might, by compelling this powerful, entrenched tribe to leave their fortified homes. That was a raw exercise of power.
But the hikmah, the wisdom, was in how he did it. He didn't just annihilate them in a flash.
That is the crucial point.
Yeah.
He absolutely could have. But the wisdom of Allah dictated the method. A siege and an expulsion. Why? Because this established a legal and historical precedent for the young Muslim community on how to handle treachery.
I see. It was a teaching moment.
It was a crucial test for the believers. It taught them patience and reliance on God, rather than, instant, undeserved gratification. It teaches us that divine action is always mighty, but it is always, always profoundly wise.
Okay, so let's transition from that cosmic prologue to the specific historical events, the Asbab al-Nuzul, the reasons for revelation, in verses 2 through 4. So, the Banu Nadir, they were a major Jewish tribe, known for their wealth, their heavily fortified settlements, and they were bound to the Muslims by a strong peace treaty. So what happened? What shattered that security?
Well, the sources, especially the biography of the Prophet, as cited by Ibn Kathir, they detail this unforgivable act of treachery. The Prophet, peace be upon him, went to their settlement to request their contribution toward the daya, the blood wit.
Which was a standard treaty obligation, right?
A completely standard obligation. A payment for 2 men who had been killed by mistake by a Muslim. The Prophet went there in good faith, fulfilling an existing alliance requirement.
And they seemed to agree.
Outwardly, yes. They said, of course. Asked him to wait while they gathered the funds. But behind the scenes, they conspired to drop a massive millstone, a huge grinding stone, from the roof of one of their fortresses right onto the messenger while he sat below.
Wow, this wasn't impulsive. This was a planned assassination attempt.
A planned, high-level assassination attempt on the leader of the city, violating every standard of hospitality, peace, and morality you can imagine.
The audacity is just staggering.
It's an act of complete theological and political arrogance. They assumed their physical location, the height of their walls, gave them total impunity. They completely underestimated the power of the divine.
Which brings us to the astonishing conclusion of the siege. And it's all defined by this one concept, Rub. Verse 2 is so revealing here.
It really is.
It says, you did not think they would leave, and they thought that their fortresses would protect them from Allah, but Allah came upon them from where they had not expected and cast terror into their hearts.
Just look at that contrast. The believers, they saw the immense fortifications, the superior weapons, the entrenched position. They were expecting a long, grueling, bloody war. The phrase, you did not think they would leave, confirms the huge psychological obstacle the Muslims were facing.
And the Banu Nadir, on the other hand, were relying entirely on, their material security, their thick stone walls, their weapons. They thought they were untouchable.
But the reality, a rapid surrender. The siege only lasted about 15 days.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Because the defeat was achieved through a spiritual intervention, the casting of Rub terror into their hearts.
It bypassed their physical defenses completely.
Completely. It wasn't physical force that defeated them. It was internal collapse. They were defeated existentially, long before they were defeated physically.
And this is where it gets so interesting for us today. For the learner, this isn't just some historical trivia. This is the ultimate lesson on the illusion of security.
Mm-hmm.
What are the modern forts that we rely on that can crumble just as quickly?
That's the question. They're the material securities we build around ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Financial wealth, professional status, our political influence, our reliance on technology. The surah teaches that no human-made fortress, no matter how complex or expensive, be it a massive bank account or advanced surveillance tech, can withstand the divine will or the consequences of moral decay.
So when a community chooses to oppose truth, their sources of supposed security actually become their deepest vulnerability.
They become psychological cages.
And the physical act of self-destruction is literally written into the chapter. Verse 2 continues. They destroyed their houses by their own hands and the hands of the believers.
The historical reality here, confirmed by the commentators, is quite dramatic. The Muslims were dismantling the outer parts of the houses to get in, but the Banu Nadir were also actively dismantling their own homes from the inside.
Why would they do that?
They were so wealthy that they prioritized salvaging expensive materials. Doors, lintels, intricate wooden carvings. They were literally choosing to salvage material goods over the structural integrity of their own homes.
Wow.
They carried those salvaged items out of Medina on 600 camels. But the metaphorical insight is far more profound than just lumber.
Of course.
It's the eternal truth that sin inherently dismantles the infrastructure of one's own life, treachery, corruption. These are acts of self-destruction. Their actions just showed that when the spiritual foundation is gone, a community actively participates in its own undoing.
Before we move on, you mentioned a fascinating term, the first gathering, Al-Hashr. Where does that fit in here?
Scholars like Al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir, they highlight that this specific expulsion to the Levant, to Syria, is sometimes called the Al-Hashr by the early Muslims.
And that's not just a geographical reference.
It's an eschatological one, meaning this historical event, this small judgment in 625 CE, serves as a foreshadowing, a prelude to the ultimate universal gathering of all mankind on the Day of Judgment.
So it links history directly to the end times.
It does. It impresses upon you, the believer, that every earthly act of justice is just an echo of the final judgment, and that this life is just preparation for that definitive Hashr.
Okay, let's move now to a section that deals with military law, and it touches on something that feels like a very modern ethical debate.
Environmental damage during conflict.
Exactly. During the siege, the Prophet ordered the cutting and burning of some of the date palms.
And this caused an immediate controversy. The opponents, the Banu Nadir, the hypocrites, they seized on it. They called it fasad, corruption in the land. They argued the Prophet was contradicting the general Islamic rule of preserving life and property in war.
And these weren't just any palm trees, were they? The sources are specific.
Very specific. They were the Lina palms, which yielded the superior soft dates. This was a major economic asset and a source of pride for them.
So the destruction wasn't random. It was a calculated strategic move.
And that's vital context. The revelation of verse 5 came to adjudicate the whole thing, to settle the matter. Whatever you cut down of the palm trees or you left standing on their roots, it was by leave of Allah and in order that he might disgrace the rebellious.
So the verse establishes a core principle in the Islamic law of war, CR. The principle of military necessity, or darura.
Precisely. While the general rule is to protect agriculture, this verse establishes a legitimate exception. The scholars determined that destroying the Lina was necessary because it was a significant source of their power, their pride, and their psychological attachment.
That was a required psychological blow.
It signaled to them that their time in Medina was irreversibly over. It broke their hope of holding out and ever coming back.
And the verse is clear that the ultimate justification is to disgrace the rebellious, the fazikin.
This gives us a massive life lesson in prioritizing values.
Yeah.
We often face conflicts between two good things, right? Environmental preservation versus establishing justice. The surah dictates the hierarchy. Removing treachery and establishing spiritual and social integrity are higher goals than the sanctity of physical property. Sometimes that requires a material sacrifice.
So to make this personal for the learner, the lesson of the Lina palms applies to breaking our own material attachments.
Absolutely. For the Banu Nadir, those prized assets fueled their arrogance and gave them a false sense of security. Cutting them down was a spiritual lesson as much as a military one. We have to be willing to sever ties with our material comforts, our own prized possessions, if those comforts become the fuel for our ego or our opposition to truth.
Nothing material is sacred enough to override the demand for spiritual justice.
That's it.
So from military jurisprudence, the surah transitions seamlessly into one of the most innovative economic laws in the Qur'an, the law of Fay. This deals with the vast abandoned wealth left by the Banu Nadir.
And understanding this section requires a really rigorous definition of terms.
Yeah.
The sources make a critical distinction between Fay and Ghanima. This is where the depth of the surah really shines.
Let's start with the familiar one. Ghanima is the classic spoils of war. You risk your life, you engage in active combat cavalry, battle lines.
Exactly. And Ghanima is distributed based on participation. 4/5 goes directly to the soldiers who fought, and 1/5 is reserved for the state for public welfare. It rewards risk.
But Fay is fundamentally different. Verse 6 says this wealth came because the Muslims made no expedition with either cavalry or camelry. It was acquired through surrender or abandonment without a major battle.
Right, because the effort exerted was minimal and the risk was low. It was a siege relying on that spiritual terror. The wealth falls entirely under the discretion of the state or the messenger for public welfare. It's 100% designated for societal benefit.
And this is the revolutionary economic mission. It's designed to prevent wealth concentration. Because if this massive wealth, the land, the property, had been treated as ghanima.
The rich would have just gotten richer.
Exactly.
And it's essential for you, the learner, to grasp this socioeconomic context. Who fought in the military campaigns back then? Mostly those who could afford to equip themselves with a horse, armor, provisions.
So often the wealthier members of the community, like the Ansar, the helpers in Medina.
Correct. So if you had distributed this massive new wealth according to ghanima rules, the already rich soldiers would have absorbed the lion's share of it.
And the Qur'an stepped in.
It stepped in with verse 7, articulating this powerful rationale to prevent that, in order that it may not become a fortune used by the rich among you. That phrase, dulatan bain al-agnia, it's a structural, divine condemnation of capital concentration. It's an anti-oligarchy principle.
So the FEI designation is a mandatory wealth circulation mechanism. It ensures these resources flow downward, not upward.
And it specifically targets the most vulnerable populations who desperately needed it. The poor immigrants, the muhajirun who had lost everything in Makkah, along with orphans, the needy, the wayfarer. It established long-term economic balance over immediate, unequal individual gain.
And this principle of social balancing provides the context for the final universal command in that verse.
Yes. The verse concludes, and whatsoever the messenger gives you, take it, and whatsoever he forbids you, abstain from it. The immediate context was accepting this distribution.
Which meant the wealthy Ansar had to sacrifice their expectation of spoils so the poor Muhajirun could benefit.
But it becomes a maxim for total obedience in all affairs, extending far beyond economics. It tests the believer's contentment, their qana.
So contentment with God's distribution.
Yes, it's an active form of worship. They were being tested to accept a law that prioritized the collective health of the entire community, even if it meant sacrificing what they felt was their right to spoils.
Okay, so the Surah has established the law of victory and the economic law. Now it moves to define the internal social fabric that's necessary for the community's survival. We get 3 critical sociological profiles of a healthy community.
Starting with the Muhajirun in verse 8. Profile 1, the truthful immigrants. And they're defined not by what they did, but by what they endured and what motivated them.
And their endurance is defined by 3 immense sacrifices.
First, dispossession. They were violently expelled, losing every asset they had. Second, their motivation was pure, seeking bounty and acceptance from Allah, not worldly gain. And third, their action, helping Allah and His Messenger through their obedience and physical support.
And the label the Qur'an gives them is so powerful. As sadiqun, the truthful. Why is truthfulness attached specifically to this sacrifice?
It's a crucial standard, isn't it?
Right.
Truthfulness in faith isn't proven by just saying, I believe. It's proven by your willingness to sacrifice your entire material security, your worldly fortress, for spiritual integrity.
If you claim to believe in the hereafter, but you cling desperately to this world, your claim is suspect.
The Muhajirun proved their truthfulness. They chose God over gold.
Now compare that to Profile 2, the altruistic helpers, the Ansar, in verse 9. They're praised for the quality of ithar.
Ithar is maybe the highest ethical standard of social interaction. It's not just generosity, which is giving from your surplus. Ithar is transcendent altruism. It's giving to others what you yourself need, preferring their welfare over your own immediate necessity.
We have to bring in the famous Hadith narrative here because it just brings this quality to life.
Oh, the story of Abu Talha. It's profoundly moving. He hosted a guest to the Prophet, but when he got home, he and his wife realized they only had enough meager food for their own children.
Just enough for the kids.
So he told his wife to put the children to sleep, and then he gave her a crucial instruction. Set out the food, but then extinguish the lamp.
Extinguish the lamp, why?
So that in the darkness, they could sit at the table and pretend to eat. They made noises like they were eating, so the guests would assume they were all sharing the meal. This ensured the guest ate everything, while the host and his wife went hungry.
Wow. To deceive their guest for his own comfort. To willingly endure hunger for him. That level of self-sacrifice led directly to this verse.
It's an almost unimaginable ethical standard. And the verse concludes by giving us the spiritual antidote that protects this ithar. And whoever is protected from the stinginess of his soul, it is those who will be the successful.
The disease they were protected from is shuh, How does that differ from just being a hoarder from Bukal?
It's a crucial distinction. Bukal is simple hoarding, refusing to give what you have. Shu is far more destructive. It's an intense, soul-sick greed combined with a desire for what others have and a refusal to give others their rights. It's intense covetousness.
So Ithar is the absolute cure for Shu.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The Ansar succeeded because they had no envy, no hajjah toward the Muhajirun receiving the Fey wealth. They were protected from the disease of wanting what was assigned to others.
And now, the final component of the healthy community. Profile 3, the ethical successors, the tabi'un, in verse 10. This is about intergenerational continuity.
And their hallmark is the absence of guilt, rancor, or malice. Their prayer is the model for all future generations. Our Lord, forgive us and our brethren who have preceded us in faith, and do not place in our hearts any malice toward those who have believed.
This is a critical life lesson for social cohesion, even today.
It's the internal infrastructure of a community. A collective cannot survive if it's consumed by internal grudges, resentment of the past, or bitterness toward its predecessors. Guilt is a spiritual poison. Acknowledging the virtue of those who came before you, praying for them, that is a sign of profound spiritual health.
And the Surah makes a sharp pivot here. It moves from defining the ideal community to exposing its antithesis. The enemies operating externally, the Banu Nadir, and internally, the hypocrites, the munafiqun.
Led by the influential Abdullah ibn Uday. And verses 11 and 12 expose the secret pact that gave the Banu Nadir their false sense of security.
They had a clear secret alliance. The hypocrites promised them, if you are expelled, we will go with you, and if you are fought, we will help you. This was their security guarantee.
But the moment the siege began,
Nothing.
absolutely nothing. And this is a fundamental lesson in geopolitical reality. Alliances based on falsehood, on opportunism, on mutual distrust, they are inherently fragile. They look strong on paper, but they shatter the instant pressure is applied.
The surah then gives us this profound psychological diagnosis for why they failed. It details the true source of their cowardice in verse 13. Indeed, you are more dreadful in their hearts than Allah.
This is the core pathology of the hypocrite. They have a misplaced, irrational fear. They fear the reaction of creation people, institutions, more than they fear the Creator. And this internal spiritual cowardice makes them deeply unreliable and brittle under pressure.
And this internal weakness manifests physically. Verse 14 gives a precise military diagnosis. They fight only within fortified cities or from behind walls.
Think about that. Their entire military style is a direct reflection of their lack of internal fortitude. They can't face an open challenge because they lack certainty and faith. They need external structures to hide behind.
And there's a great insight here for believers facing any seemingly powerful force. You think they are united, but their hearts are divided.
The unity of the corrupt is always an illusion. They're bound by temporary self-interest, not truth or loyalty. So because their hearts are divided by envy and doubt, their foundation is hollow. Believers should never be intimidated by these monolithic power structures.
To emphasize this point about hollow alliances, the surah uses the ultimate parable of betrayal, the parable of the monk, Barisa, in verse 16. It compares the hypocrite's actions to Satan's cycle.
This narrative, expanded on by Al-Qurtubi and others, shows how Satan operates, not with a sudden shock, but via kutuat gradual steps that lead you to spiritual bankruptcy. Barisa was an ascetic monk who worshipped Allah for decades.
And the temptation didn't start with disbelief, did it?
Not at all. Satan started by tempting him to perform an act of apparent charity, caring for a sick young woman. The first, seemingly harmless step. Then it escalated subtly. Look at her, sit with her, touch her, and finally, adultery.
And when she became pregnant, the sin became a threat to his reputation.
That's when the steps accelerate. To hide the sin, Satan convinced him to murder her and bury the body. When the crime was discovered, Barisa was arrested and facing execution.
And this is the climax of the parable, just before he's executed.
Satan appears. In Barisa's moment of ultimate despair, Satan offers this grand promise of rescue. If Barisa will just commit one final small act, prostrate to him.
And he does it.
Having lost all hope in God, he commits kufr by prostrating to Satan for rescue. And what happens immediately?
Satan abandons him.
Instantly,
Right.
saying, "Indeed, I am disassociated from you. I fear Allah." That is the ultimate lesson in the satanic cycle. Incitement followed by immediate dissociation. The hypocrites incited Banu Nadir, promised aid, and immediately dissociated themselves when the consequences came.
Having defined the enemies, the surah takes this dramatic turn inward. It addresses the believers directly with a mandatory command for self-governance in verse 18. O you who have believed, fear Allah, and let every soul look to what it has put forth for tomorrow.
And this single verse is the foundational text for the doctrine of muhasabah, spiritual self-accounting. The external threats are resolved. Now, the believer has to confront the internal threat of complacency.
The first thing the Quran does here is collapse time. By calling the day of judgment tomorrow, God, it just bypasses procrastination entirely. The accounting is imminent.
It forces urgency, constant readiness.
Yeah.
If the day of judgment is tomorrow, then every single decision you make today is part of the final inventory.
And the command, let every soul look to what it has put forth, implies a detailed forensic audit. It's not a casual glance.
Not at all. It's like a careful merchant meticulously checking his ledger, his inventory, his debts, to make sure he doesn't face spiritual bankruptcy. It demands a critical assessment of your deeds, your intentions, your sincerity.
I noticed the command to fear Allah, taqwa, appears twice in this short verse. Why the duality?
Scholars offer a powerful interpretation here. The first command relates to the performance of obligations, doing what's commanded. The second relates to the sincerity, the ikhlas, and the quality of those deeds.
So it's a call for both quantity and quality in our faith.
Exactly. And this is where the practical application comes in. Scholars like Ibn Qayyim emphasize the daily ritual of muhasabah. Before sleep, you review the day's actions. Where did I fall short? Where did I succeed? You seek forgiveness and resolve to improve the ledger for the coming tomorrow.
The discussion of muhasabah and the danger of a hardened heart leads us to the source of healing, the Qur'an itself. Verse 21 has one of the most powerful comparative arguments in the book.
It does. If we had sent down this Qur'an upon a mountain, you would have seen it humbled and coming apart from fear of Allah.
The metaphor of the crumbled mountain, it's so dramatic. A mountain is the epitome of hardness and permanence. Yet the divine address would cause it to be utterly annihilated. Mutasadian through sheer reverential awe, Kashya.
The commentators explain this isn't about physical weight. It's the weight of the address itself. The mountain, despite being inanimate, would comprehend the majesty of the speaker and disintegrate out of awe.
And this verse is a profound, implicit critique of the human condition.
Exactly. If a hard, inanimate mountain would shatter from Kasha, why does the human heart, a mere piece of flesh, remain unmoved, or, even worse, hardened? It indicates an unnatural state of spiritual insensitivity, a disease of the soul far harder than rock.
The critique hits so hard because the very people who should respond are often the ones with the greatest hardness.
The surah is telling you, your heart is supposed to be more pliable than solid granite. If it isn't, something is fundamentally wrong.
So the life lesson is that the cure for a hard heart is relentless exposure and deep reflection, tadabbur.
And focusing on kashya. And again, kashya is not just fear. It's a profound reverence born of deep knowledge. It's knowing the speaker so well, knowing the divine names, that you are perpetually humbled by the speech.
We reach the climax of the surah, verses 22 through 24, a majestic procession of the most beautiful names of Allah. This is the theological anchor, bringing all the lessons back to the foundation of Tawheed.
This section is the ultimate justification for everything that came before it. Why did the law of victory work? Because of who is speaking. Why must wealth circulate? Because of who owns it.
Verse 22 begins with names defining divine knowledge and mercy.
Alim al-Ghaib wa ash-Shahada, the knower of the unseen and the seen. This is directly relevant. He knew the Banu Nadir's secret conspiracy, Kaib, just as he knew their open treaty, Shahada.
And for us, engaged in muhasabah, this demands total integrity.
And right alongside the knower, you find Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Astonishing. Even in a surah about expulsion and justice, mercy is the dominant attribute. It teaches us that justice against an oppressor is in itself a profound mercy to the oppressed.
Then in verse 23, we get this powerful cluster of sovereignty and security names, Al-Malik, the sovereign, the king.
This settles the ownership dispute forever. Banu Nadir claimed ownership of their forts. This name reminds us Allah is the true owner. We're just trustees.
Then As-Salam, the source of peace.
They sought peace through fragile treaties. True peace, salam, is safety from all spiritual defect and safety in the hereafter. That's granted only by the divine.
Then we have the duo relating to security and watchfulness, Al-Mumin and Al-Muhaymin.
Al-Mumin is the one who granted security to the Muslims by casting Rub into the enemy's hearts, a psychological security. And Al-Muhaymin is the guardian who constantly watches over all things, reinforcing that feeling of accountability.
And now a duality that is essential to the surah's application of power, Al-Aziz and Al-Jabbar.
This duality is beautiful. On one hand, Al-Jabbar is the compeller. the one who compels the proud and the tyrants like the Banu Nadir to submit.
And on the other hand,
Root also means to mend a broken bone. He is the mender, the one who mends the broken hearts and the vulnerabilities of the believers after hardships. He is both severe in justice and absolute in compassion.
and this leads to al-Mutakabir, the superior, the one who is greatest, a sobering counterpoint to human arrogance.
Greatness belongs only to him. Any human claim to greatness, like the forts, wealth, or status of the Banu Nadir, is an attempt to compete with the divine, and it leads only to humiliation.
Verse 24 culminates with the sequence of creation names, Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, Al-Musawwir.
This sequence shows the depth of creation. Al-Khaliq, creating from nothing. Al-Bari, initiating the form. Al-Musawwir, giving the detailed features. Just as he fashions the universe with this power, he fashions the circumstances of victory, the economic laws, and the spiritual framework for the believers.
So this entire procession of names proves that every single lesson in this surah military, economic, social anchors back to the absolute power, wisdom, and unity of Allah.
To synthesize this entire journey, we realize Surah Al-Hashr isn't just a historical narrative, it's a comprehensive manual for existential success. The takeaways are so precise. Material strength is an illusion without spiritual alignment.
Proven by the defeat via Rube.
Social justice requires constant wealth circulation via the law of Fay, and community health depends entirely on the absence of rancor, gil, fostered by altruism, by ithar.
And for you, the learner, the surah is a deeply personal call to self-audit, to muhasaba. It demands we dismantle the internal idols of self-reliance and the fear of people. We saw how the hypocrite's fatal flaw was fearing creation more than the creator.
That is the central diagnosis this surah offers, and it leaves us with a provocative thought to explore as you internalize this deep dive. Given this profound psychological diagnosis of the hypocrites, ruling their lives by the fear of people, what specific, measurable action can a believer take today to move from a life ruled by the fear of people, which leads to fragility and deceit, to a life ruled by khashya, that profound reverential awe of the divine?
How do you re-engineer your daily choices, your compliance, your speech, your private intentions, to reflect the fact that the exalted in might, the wise, is more dreadful and more worthy of respect in your heart than any person or any institution on this earth?
That's the question to take with you.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you with goodness for spending your valuable time listening to us.